You are doing absolutely insane mental gymnastics to say all persons born in the United States are citizens of the United States doesn't mean that all people born in the United States are not citizens of the United States. You realize that this is insane mental gymnastics, and you haven't actually named the why that interpretation is correct. Like, what in the text says that any of that. The fact of the matter is that people who are born here to immigrant parents are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and are born here and are therefore a citizen. Lawful expat. Oh, I think I've talked to this guy. Hello?
How's it going?
How's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Good. Are you agreeer, disagreeer?
I disagree. I voted for Donald Trump.
Okay. You sound old enough, but for TikTok purposes, how old are you?
25.
Okay, perfect. All right, do you want me to give my argument?
Sure.
So, I think Donald Trump is anti-American because it feels like he has no respect for the Constitution, and it feels like he has no respect for the peaceful transfer of power, and I think that those two aspects are absolutely crucial to America.
And that's it?
Yeah. No respect for the Constitution, no respect for elections.
Can you show that he has no respect for the Constitution?
We can look at him trying to get rid of birthright citizenship with executive action, or at least saying that he'd be in support of doing that, or the Terminate the Constitution post on Truth Social.
Well, the 14th Amendment's pretty explainable because if you don't ignore the phrase subject to the jurisdiction thereof, it makes a lot more sense.
So what's your claim?
Well, my claim is for the past 128 years, the 14th Amendment has been ignoring the phrase in the 14th Amendment that says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
So, when it says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States, why does that not include people who are birthright?
When it says all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, the phrase and subject to the jurisdiction thereof would mean absolutely nothing if it was implying location, because location's already included in the first part of that sentence.
Okay, so are you saying that the people that are born here who are American citizens who are subject to American laws are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States?
Yeah, so when you're a U.S. citizen, and even when you're abroad, like you can be charged for treason by the U.S. government. You can be charged for crimes. You still have jurisdiction under some U.S. laws. You're still the U.S. still has some jurisdiction over you.
So what's the point that you're making? Are you saying that people who are born here who are U.S. citizens are not citizens, or are you just saying that the Constitution leaves leeway for everybody to be citizens?
I'm saying that the 14th Amendment is saying that people who are global, no matter where they are, they have a duty to the United States. They're in the jurisdiction of the United States as a person, and they have birth on U.S. soil. That child will have U.S. citizenship. Whereas if you're not, you don't have that global responsibility. You don't have that responsibility of being all the time subject to the laws of the United States, and you just happen to have a kid on U.S. soil. Your kid's not going to have U.S. citizenship.
This has nothing to do with who's giving birth to the person. It's just all persons who are born or naturalized. So if they're born here, it doesn't matter who gave birth to them. They are a U.S. citizen, according to the 14th Amendment.
So let's take a hypothetical. Let's say Russia were to invade the United States tomorrow, and one of their soldiers had a child on U.S. soil. Would that child get U.S. citizenship?
Probably.
Do you think that would that would not be a total violation of the United States' sovereignty? You don't think that the writers of the 14th Amendment thought of that?
So I'd imagine that in wartime, there's a certain level of malleability with the Constitution, just by extension of like martial law or the powers presented to the president in wartime. So I don't think that the Constitution would be upheld the same way as it is now, as if it was if Russia invaded us. So this amendment would probably be kind of null if we were literally in the midst of a Russian invasion into the U.S. So it doesn't apply the same way.
Where in the Constitution, in the 14th Amendment, or anywhere in the Constitution, does it say that the 14th Amendment is null in wartime? Does anywhere in wartime?
Well, doesn't the president get kind of like unprecedented powers outside of the Constitution in wartime?
You still have constitutional rights during wartime.
Sure, but the idea that this would get necessarily upheld, I don't know if that necessarily follows. But even if it did, you're not arguing that Donald Trump doesn't agree. Like, you're saying that the problem isn't that Donald Trump does want to get rid of this part of the Constitution. The problem is that it's a silly part of the Constitution, right?
Well, he wants to interpret it correctly.
No, he doesn't want to interpret it correctly, because the way he wants to interpret it is that he could remove people who are born here's citizenship with executive action, which it takes a particular reading of this amendment and the leaving out of the first like 10 words of it in order to come to that interpretation.
He has never proposed removing citizenship from people born in the United States.
No, he absolutely advocated for removing birthright citizenship with executive action. Yes, he did.
Can I tell you what he actually proposed?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so in his executive order, he wants to tell agencies to start interpreting the Constitution correctly going forward, so not to issue
to interpret the Constitution correctly, in that all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. are citizens of the U.S., doesn't actually mean that all persons born in the U.S. are subject to the U.S. That's the actual interpretation of the Constitution.
It's saying all persons born in the U.S. and who have a legal jurisdiction as a person to the U.S. are U.S. citizens.
So are you saying that the people born here who are U.S. citizens are not subject to the U.S.? Because that's the only way that this would nullify the 14th Amendment, is that if they're not subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S., but they are.
Well, subject to the jurisdiction thereof is saying as a person. So like if an illegal alien were to leave the United States right now, they would not be subject to U.S. laws. A U.S. citizen who leaves the United States and lives in wherever still has to pay taxes on all their income. But they still have to follow laws. There's even laws like age of consent. That
this is irrelevant, though, because the text of the 14th Amendment is that all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the U.S. So that is the verbatim text, and you don't disagree that they were born here, and you don't disagree that they are subject to U.S. law, but for some reason you're saying that they're not citizens still.
Well, they're not fully subject to U.S. law.
The immigrant child that was born here, that is a U.S. citizen by every legal body that would be able to tell, isn't subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S.
Well, under the correct interpretation of the 14th Amendment, just because you're born here, it wouldn't automatically make you a U.S. citizen.
You are doing absolutely insane mental gymnastics to say all persons born in the United States are citizens of the United States. Doesn't mean that all people born in the United States are not citizens of the United States. You realize that this is insane mental gymnastics, and you haven't actually named why that interpretation is correct. Like, what in the text says that any of that. The fact of the matter is that people who are born here to immigrant parents are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and are born here and are therefore a citizen.
Well, who wouldn't be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States?
Their parents? But it doesn't say that their parents are. It doesn't say their parents are citizens. It says that the person born here that is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States is a citizen. You haven't given a reason to interpret it any other way.
Well, the writers of the 14th Amendment, I think it was Senator Jacob Howard, said this phrase right here obviously makes it so people who are foreigners, even foreigners, wouldn't their children wouldn't automatically get U.S. citizenship. That's why they included that phrase.
Can you cite that? Can you give me like anything that would find that?
You can look on the actual Wikipedia of the 14th Amendment of the birthright citizenship. I think it was Senator Jacob Howard.
Senator Jacob Howard.
Yeah, I think it was Jacob Howard. I don't have my computer on me, so I.
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now.
Cool.
During the original congressional debate over the amendment, Senator Jacob M. Howard of Michigan, the author of the Citizenship Clause, described the clause as having the same content despite different wording as the earlier Civil Rights Act. Namely, it excludes Native Americans who maintain their tribal ties and persons born in the United States who are foreigners, aliens, or who belong to the families of ambassadors of foreign ministers.
Yeah, so it's.
So, one, I don't think that quote gives you enough context, because when you say born to people who are foreigners, why would it not explicitly say that in the amendment? First of all, second of all, it doesn't say that in the amendment. So none of that is laid out in this amendment. That's it.
Well, it was so implied. It was so.
No, it's not implied, because the people who are born here are subject to the jurisdiction. So it's not implied anywhere. Unless, like, foreign-born citizens are above the law.
You just said yourself that people from Indian tribes who are obviously it would be subject to the U.S. laws of the local jurisdiction, but that's not what subject to the jurisdiction thereof means.
What does subject to the jurisdiction thereof mean, then?
That means you as a person you're under the control of the United States, or are subject to the laws of some of the laws of the United States, no matter where you are.
Right, so but that person who was born here is subject to the laws of the United States, even if their parents aren't.
Okay, then why not until 1930 did Native Americans not get U.S. citizenship when born?
Because we were racist? I don't know. Because we weren't interpreting the actual text of the. But that's irrelevant to the actual text of the amendment.
Well, if it truly meant it's because that's what subject to the jurisdiction thereof means. It's basically implying citizenship, and because you can't really define a term with.
If that's what that meant, then this part of the amendment would be completely useless. Saying, "Oh, all people who are citizens are citizens." Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, you can't right. It would make that's why they included and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That's in the.
So all people who are born here are citizens. All people who are born here and are citizens are citizens. Why the fuck would we need an amendment for that?
Well, it was implied that.
Why would they imply that?
Well, I mean, you can't write out every possible scenario in an amendment.
But you don't think that if they actually meant to exclude the immigrants that were born here, they would have said unless they're a foreigner, like the senator wanted to, but isn't included in the amendment? You don't think that he would be able to include like 2 words to actually carve out what you're saying that it means to imply?
Well, language changes over time, and back then it was.
But you realize that subject to the jurisdiction thereof does actually apply to an immigrant that was born here, right? Because they are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States.
No, not as a person. If they leave the United States, they don't have to obey any U.S. laws unless it's directly attacking the U.S.
An immigrant that was born here?
If a foreigner gives birth on U.S. soil, their child a foreigner can leave the country whenever they want.
Mm-hmm. That child, the person that was born here, right? Not the parents? Because I don't care about the parents. It's not saying that the parents become citizens. It's saying that the child becomes a citizen.
Okay. So you're saying Then what do you think subject to the jurisdiction thereof means?
It means they're subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. It means exactly what it says.
Why wouldn't they be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States if they're in the United States?
If they were illegal.
Okay, then they're not subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
But the people that you're describing are legal because they were born here. All
No,
persons
dude,
born or naturalized and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. I don't know what situation where someone is born here but isn't subject to the jurisdiction is a citizen. But that okay, just to be clear, you realize the gymnastics that it takes to say that all persons born in or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States doesn't include an immigrant that was born here that are subject to the laws of the United States. It takes like wild gymnastics to claim that, right?
well, why wouldn't it just say subject to the laws of the United States? Why does it say subject to the jurisdiction thereof?
Thereof the United States, and jurisdiction would
Yeah,
mean the
thereof.
ability to prosecute the person, right?
Well, the first part of the phrase already implies location.
Yeah, and
So if the second part of the phrase would be completely pointless if it was also implying location. If it was meaning it's trying to tell you that the person is subject to the laws of the United States, irregardless of where they are.
well, because I think the U.S. has jurisdiction over people that aren't citizens, whereas, like, if they're in the United States.
Well, yeah, the U.S. only has, when someone leaves the United States, the U.S. only has jurisdiction over them if they're lawful permanent residents or U.S. citizens.
Right, which these immigrant children would be.
Right, the ones
because they were born here, and they were subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, and so they are citizens of the state that they are in. That's all this amendment is saying. Like, how can you read this to say that it says anything else?
Because you're not understanding what subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
No, you're not understanding what subject to the jurisdiction thereof means, because you're just saying.
But
okay, that's fine. But just know that. Yeah, it was great. Just it doesn't make any sense for subject to the jurisdiction thereof to just mean that you're already a citizen. What the fuck? What? All persons who are, let's replace that. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and are citizens of the United States. What? Yeah, no, what are you, what? Yeah, no shit. It's the fucking stupidest thing I've ever heard. Why would we need an amendment for that? Okay. Hi, Delta. Hi, Master Debater.
I think Trump is the most pro-American man to ever exist and walk on the planet.
You're lying.
Hey, Delta, sorry, real quick. I just want to address Rin's last point. So the reason why it's phrased that way is because people who are here on visas, who are here undocumented, are still subject to the laws of the United States, right? The people who are not are people like diplomats or the children of diplomats, right? So if a diplomat comes here to the United States, gives birth, their child is not subject to the laws of the United States, right? Sure. Diplomats, like if a diplomat unalives somebody in the United States, the U.S. government cannot hold them to account, right? They are sent back to their other country, and there might be an extradition agreement where then they might come back, but like the United States cannot prosecute them. Whereas, like, for instance, an undocumented person comes here and they do something, they are still subject to the laws of the United States. This is why this is the case. And this is why it doesn't say citizens. This is why it says the language it does in there. So, there is a differential, and that saying people who are subject to the laws of the United States is a much broader category of person.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I just don't get how anyone could interpret this amendment to actually mean, like, it's either wholly redundant or it's exactly what it's saying it is and undermining that guy's point entirely.
The issue with the Constitution is no matter what like implication there is with like the original writers, like Thomas Jefferson, I'm pretty sure said something I can't remember exactly, but it wasn't in the Constitution, so it doesn't matter what he said. It's not in the Constitution.
Right.
We now have to reinterpret that over time.
And also, real quick, the guy that he was citing to say that is just a senator who argued over the inclusion of the clause. That doesn't mean that he has any jurisdiction as to how that is interpreted, and it doesn't mean whatever is he was pushing for that isn't in the text is somehow in the text because he wanted to do that. That doesn't